Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs.
Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. I am just going to get right into the herbs today because today is a particularly interesting herb. As I have said many times, I really like herbs that can also be used as food, herbs we may have in our cabinet in the kitchen right now, so that when we need them, we don't have to run out and buy anything, we don't have to order anything. And when it comes to herbs that you can eat or include in food, we don't even have to make a tincture. I mean, we don't have to wait a couple of weeks or a month to prepare the herb. We have it right here at hand, and we can use it right now when we need it. Now, sometimes with these herbs, I'll give you a very good example. I'm out of town right now, and I stopped into a fast food joint, and somebody there was obviously sick because the next day after eating my hamburger, I came down with a very bad stomach flu. I mean, that kind of stomach virus that is, the nausea, the diarrhea, the indigestion, the constant burping and stomach upset, along with a fever and aches and pains, and just really feeling out of it. A bad one, actually. Um, the first night it really hit my stomach, I could not sleep. I mean, I could not sleep at all. And I went and looked in the kitchen cabinet at the relative's house where I was staying, and there was fennel seed. Fennel seed, I think I had actually purchased a year or two ago when I was visiting again. I wanted to make some Italian style sausage. I really like Italian sausage. And it's pretty easy actually to get a pork butt and grind it up, or you can even really just chop it up fine. Pork butt has a nice ratio of fat. And combine that with salt, of course, pepper, little crushed red pepper. I like my Italian sausage spicy, garlic, onion, and fennel seed, crushed, ground up fennel seed. Well, fennel seed is one of the best herbal remedies for settling a stomach or taking care of all that indigestion. There are also cloves. Cloves have an antispasmodic ability, and that's very good for the cramping and settling down diarrhea and other issues like that. And there was dill, another herb I think I had bought when I was visiting because I wanted to make some dill pickles. And I always put a little bit of dill in potato soup and such. And that was the only one I did any kind of preparation with. Okay, I just took some fennel seeds and about a fourth, maybe a third, a teaspoon at a time, chewed them up and swallowed them. Within an hour or so, things really settled down, and I felt so much better. Um, the cloves, I just chewed them up and swallowed them, maybe three, four whole cloves, no big deal. And the dill, what I did with that was I warmed some milk and I put the dill in there. I made essentially a tea of dill and milk. That's a remedy for all kinds of indigestion, stomach issues, gosh, colicky babies. I mean, you name it. This goes back centuries, thousands of years. People have used dill and coriander and fennel. I mean, those three especially for all kinds of digestive issues. And they have wonderful herbal qualities, and I'll get into those specific herbs another day. But my point is, when you have these herbs, spices in terms of fennel and clove, because remember, an herb is the leaf or the flower, and a spice comes from the seed. A root can also be an herb, but the seed is always a spice. When you have these spices and herbs on hand, you're using them for cooking on a regular basis, makes your food better, makes your food more digestible, reduces the possibility of food poisoning. But when you have them on hand, when you need them, and you really don't feel capable of getting up and going to a drugstore to buy something, and you'd really rather not go to a doctor. I mean, I haven't been to a doctor in over 20 years and have absolutely no intention of going again if I can possibly help it. Anything short of a heart attack, a compound fracture, or cancer, I'm going to do my best to stay away from a doctor because I have honestly no confidence in them whatsoever after the COVID epidemic. If I had a doctor who was telling me I had to wear a cloth mask that had been proven to neither prevent you from spreading the disease or keep you from catching it, I would not go back to that doctor. If I had a doctor that insisted I take a vaccine that doesn't prevent you from getting a virus and has all kinds of potential bad side effects, I wouldn't go back to that doctor. And having spoken recently with a local dentist, and he was saying how he was so upset because basically the what do they call them these days? The big corporate owned hospitals and such were saying they didn't want people to even come in for dental procedures or other procedures. I mean, surgeries, cancer treatment, organ transplant, et cetera, unless they had been vaccinated. And he said flat out, he said the vaccine doesn't work. The vaccine is a money making scam, and we're allowing people to suffer and die because we're holding to this position that we know is untrue and untenable. And he said, that's a violation of my Hippocratic oath. He was very upset. So, like I was trying to say, if you have these things on hand, and we especially do when we use herbs for cooking. I mean, I have sage in the cabinet that I use very often. I have mint that I use in many things, oregano, basil, of course, thyme, right? Just in those few plants. I've got antivirals, antiseptics, herbs that are good for digestion, herbs that are antimicrobial, herbs that are good for coughs, colds, and fevers, and expectorants, and etc. And they're just considered culinary herbs. I grow, 30, 50 culinary herbs. Yeah, that's a lot. It's a whole lot. But you know what? I really love food. I really love to cook and I really love to eat. I got into herbalism because of my passion for food. My passion for food has been really probably one of the biggest motivating factors in my entire life. Simply put, I love to cook. I love to combine flavors. A lot of times I'd rather cook than eat. I just so enjoy the act of cooking, the art of cooking, the creative experience of combining flavors. It's part of my heritage as being part French. It's just part, honestly, I think aside from my religious beliefs, my Catholicism, my political beliefs probably would come in third or fourth on this. The defining aspects of my character, next to my religion, are my passion for food and music. And like I've said before, I play about 12 instruments. I mean, I'm not kidding. I play almost a dozen instruments. And, on any given day, I may pick up two or three different instruments and figure out all kinds of chord melodies and, work out music theory on just a simple song and turn it into something really that interests me. And just as I'm entirely self taught when it comes to music, I'm very much I very much combine those flavors in my head and usually come up with original dishes rather than sticking to recipes. So yeah, I like to have a ton of herbs on hand because that makes food more interesting. I mean, if I get up in the morning and I'm wondering what I'm going to eat, well, yeah, maybe I've made some homemade sausage. Maybe, that Italian sausage is good, but in the morning, maybe I want a breakfast sausage where I've combined pork with sage and crushed red pepper and, maybe I want a little oregano or something. Or maybe I want an English style sausage. These are impossible to buy where I live. Maybe you live where you have like international sausage vendors, but I have to make it myself if I want it. So I make andouilles and I make the boudins and I make the breakfast sausages. I make Chinese sausages. I really respect the Polish tradition of sausage making. I have a huge book on Polish sausage making. I refer to that all the time. German sausage, you name it. But like if I wake up in the morning and I've got a taste for something different, right? Well, it's so easy for me to just take some pork, like I said, a pork butt, either grind it or chop it up really fine, and combine that with some chopped onion. I'll do everything fresh. I'm not putting this is not a sausage in a store. I'll put some chopped onion in there, maybe a little garlic, maybe not. Um, green apple and sage. That's a wonderful sausage. It's one of the best sausages. Maybe a little ground clove in there, a little allspice, a lot of salt, and I like some heat. I'll put some red pepper in there. I can sit there in the morning, even before I get out of bed, and I can think, all right, what would I like? And that sausage becomes a vehicle for the various herbs and flavors I want to put in there. If I don't want to go that far out, maybe the eggs become a vehicle for using 3 or 4 different herbs. Well, the herb I'm going to talk about today is really fascinating. This one has a history essentially as old as the recorded history of mankind. This is an herb that was mentioned in the Bible. This is an herb that goes by at least 3 different names. Okay. And people either love it or hate it, but it comes in 2 different forms. Okay. Um, I don't think anybody doesn't like uh, really convoluted way to put it. What was the old commercial? Nobody doesn't like Sara Lee bread. Well, I don't think anybody doesn't like this herb in one form or another. Whereas people generally love it, it's called coriander. Coriander is the seed of the herb, and it's used in so many recipes. It is one of the top flavors in pickles and corned beef, and it's just really good. Like pastrami, more than corned beef, more like pastrami, really. Um, Corned beef and pastrami. Okay, corning meat essentially means pickling meat. It was an old way of preserving. Old English corn refers to grains. Okay, it doesn't mean corn on the cob. It would actually be more like the grains of, wheat or barley. Well, salt came in grains like that, and they called it corns of salt. The corned beef was simply to soak the beef in a corning or pickling salt-based solution to preserve it. Well, over time, people added various spices to it. And eventually, we get into like pastrami, where it's heavily spiced with all these pickling spices and then smoked. And it is truly one of the greatest foods on the face of the earth. Whenever I meet someone from, say, New York or New Jersey, and when I start telling them about the mountains of North Carolina, and they say, I want to come visit you, I say, okay, these are my terms. You have to do one thing. You can come stay with me. I'll show you around. We'll go hiking, but you got to bring me some pastrami from a good Jewish deli. I mean, seriously, that is the best meat with some good mustard and some sauerkraut and a nice rye bread or pumpernickel rice swirl. I could literally eat my weight in pastrami over the course of a month. You know how much I love barbecue. I love smoked meats. Smoked pickled brisket is what this is. Oh my gosh, it's good. But anyway, I am literally drooling now. Let me get back to coriander. Well, you say, well, everybody loves coriander. What don't people always like? Cilantro. People either love it or hate it. It's the same plant. Cilantro is the leaves of coriander. The name actually comes from ancient Greek. Apparently, there was a stink bug in the area. If you ever encountered a stink bug, it's a beetle that puts out a very distinctive scent, and it stinks. That's how it drives away predators and such. They believed that coriander, or cilantro as we know it, smelled like that stink bug. So coriander actually comes from ancient words that essentially mean stinking insect. but that is our cilantro. You may have even heard it called Chinese parsley. Cilantro or coriander is very, very popular in traditional Chinese cooking as well as traditional Chinese medicine. And so it was often called Chinese parsley just to differentiate it from, European parsley, which is a very closely related plant. I happen to love parsley. I eat a great deal of parsley. I love cilantro. I eat a great deal of cilantro. And I love coriander. So I am not one of these people that has an aversion to coriander. But I do remember when I was a child, I'm going to say maybe 10, 11, 12 years old, we were just starting to get um, really authentic Mexican restaurants in rural areas of North Carolina. You know, well, that's a long story. We're talking about NAFTA. We're talking about when most of the small farmers lost their farms. The farms were bought by large corporate farming operations and staffed by illegal immigrants. Yes, the agricultural economy of North Carolina, especially. We have Smithfield Pork here. We have several very big companies that employ almost entirely illegal immigrant labor. Big chicken companies. We have Mount Olive Pickles. We have a lot of corn and soybean production that is corporate owned. A lot of it's owned by China. Smithfield Pork is owned by China. Um, if you look at the town where Smithfield Pork is located, by the way, they were run out of Smithfield, Virginia after poisoning the Pagan River to the point that they said no one could eat fish or seafood out or shellfish out of it, any kind of aquatic life out of that river for about 1,000 years, which is how long it was going to take to clean it up. I mean, I eat a lot of pork. I don't eat Smithfield pork. Let me just give you that caveat. It stinks. I mean, if you ever get some Smithfield pork and compare it to some nice fresh pork from a local hog farmer or from another company, open the packages, sniff it. Smithfield pork stinks. It does not smell like pork. But Tar Heel is very near where my family originates. My family has been there since the early 1700s. My family fought in the American Revolution there. The every little community around there has one of my family's last name as the name of that town. My great grandfather owned like an entire town about a few miles from Tar Heel. I mean, he owned the general store. He built all the houses. He rented them out. He sold them. He loaned people money to buy the houses that he built. He ran a timber mill. I mean, he owned timberland. This is where my roots are. Okay, right on the Cape Fear River. Um, it is so bad, it is so very bad that a few years ago, no one ran for mayor. There were literally not enough American citizens left in the town to even file to run for the cushiest, best paying job in town, right? It is almost entirely illegal immigrants. And I'm not disparaging anyone. They come here to work, but um, they that whole system of farming has absolutely destroyed the agricultural economy. They have made it so a citizen cannot afford to farm, and these little illegal immigrants are basically treated almost like slave labor. Okay, this is human trafficking. It is slave labor. It is not moral, but these big companies fund our universities, the agricultural programs in those universities, and much of our politicians, our politics. It was a Herculean effort to get them to stop using hog lagoons, which were these huge waste pits that whenever we would have a big storm, like a hurricane that comes in here every few years, would wash into the Cape Fear River and other major sources of drinking water and contaminate it. And the companies really didn't care about the local folks who were drinking contaminated water. I mean, the Gen X plant just up the road from there that made a lot of the Teflon on your pots, they contaminated the Cape Fear River and all the wells in the area to the point that they've had to settle a big class action settlement because they gave so many thousands of people cancer and autoimmune conditions like ALS, for instance. These companies that came in and took advantage of our very corrupt political systems really did not care about us, don't care about us, and were very often foreign owned. And anyway, that's a long way of saying that the only upside to that was that we started getting some really good, authentic Mexican restaurants. And so I began to be exposed to all the great Mexican food that I just fell in love with. And of course, I had a lot of great Mexican friends growing up. I dated some beautiful Mexican girls. And not only from Mexico, folks from South America and such. Very fond of the Mexican people. And I don't like to see them exploited any more than I like to see our environment and our citizens exploited. But unless and until the government actually starts answering to the people and the Chamber of Commerce stops screwing us, that's what we're stuck with. But anyway, I came to really like the taste of cilantro. But I do recall the first time I tasted it, I thought it tasted like soap. And that's what most people say when they're talking about cilantro. If they say they don't like it, they say it tastes like soap. I guess it's an acquired taste. The more you have of it, just the more you come to like it. And it really has become one of my favorite herbs. I grow it from seed just about every year. But I'm certainly not the only one. Um, the first evidence of coriander and cilantro comes from the pre-pottery Neolithic culture of Israel. They have found coriander seed and evidence of cilantro in caves in Israel dating from between 8,800 to 6,500 BC. That is that is essentially 10,000 years ago. People were growing and cultivating cilantro and coriander to use medicinally and culinarily. And apparently, the Egyptians used it medicinally, and um, it was buried in the tomb of King Tutankhamun. It's mentioned in the Ebers Papyrus, which dates to about 1550 BC. And you may recall in the Bible, um, manna, the bread from heaven, God gave the Israelites in the desert with Moses, was described as being like coriander seed. That's how common coriander was in the ancient world. By the time we get to Greek herbalism and Dioscorides Materia Medica, he called it corianum. He said it was often called corian. That's the word from which we get carrion, carrion meaning like roadkill, rotting flesh, right? So they were really found it very stinky, and I wonder if they may have had a stronger variety. If maybe we have bred some of that aromatic quality out of the plant, because it certainly does not smell like a stink bug. It may be a very faint way, and it definitely doesn't smell like rotting meat. Anyway, he said it was able to cool. It was a cooling herb, and he liked it being applied to sores, ulcers, swelling, such as that. He said with combined with honey and raisins, it would cure essentially pustules that would, he said, appeared at night. I'm not really sure what that would have been. Could have been perhaps a bacterial infection or even related to leprosy. He said it was good for inflammation of the urinary system and bladder, good for kidney and bladder stones. Carbuncles, which were infected boils. So again, he was using that herb very similarly as he had already recommended. He said it would dissolve goiters and inflammation of the bones. So that's really something. He said a little of the seed taken in a drink with raisin wine expels worms, promotes he said it promotes the creation of the seed or sperm. He said if too much is taken, it disturbs the understanding dangerously. And as a result, men ought to avoid the excess or frequent use of it. Now, this is going to surprise you. Coriander seed actually has a long history as a somewhat hallucinogenic plant. You may remember, I don't remember if it was last week or week before last, I told you how nutmeg, I made the mistake of uh, one time taking some very bad advice. I read it in an herbal book written by a hippie in the 60s or 70s who recommended so many grams of nutmeg for pain and relaxation, all that. Well, without doing any further research, I followed his advice and was like knocked out, stupefied, could not think, could not move, horrible migraine headache, burning lungs, one of the worst experiences of my life. And so, you may wonder sometimes why I give you so many references. I always tell you where I got my information from. I think it is very, very important to know what your sources are, to give your sources. I'm going to give you 4 or 5 or 6 different sources from 4 or 5 or 6 different herbal traditions in different countries around the world. And that empirical evidence tells me how these herbs ought to be used. Uh, Too many herb books, in my opinion, are written by someone who wants to pass themselves off as like a guru. They just know all the information. They don't tell you where they got all the information came from. Maybe, just some secret voice is whispering in their ear, or they're just so wise, they know everything. Yeah, I'm not going to pretend to do that. I'm going to give you the sources for everything I tell you. So you can look it up, so you can cross reference. I even say, if you ever listen to my disclaimer at the end of the show, don't even believe what I said is true. I mean, don't take my word for it. Go look it up. And that is very important when we get to something like coriander. His reference, this is, this is Corides. I mean, this is like, I don't even know, 3,000 years ago or so, saying that too much coriander could disturb understanding. Well, I did some research on this, and as I said, large amounts of coriander have an intoxicating effect. Plants for a Future says coriander is a commonly used domestic remedy, especially useful for its effect on the digestive system, treating flatulence, diarrhea, and colic. It settles the spasms of the gut and counters the effects of nervous tension. The seed is aromatic, carminative, that means it helps you get rid of gas, essentially. Expectorant, narcotic, that's the important word here, stimulant, and stomatic. It is most often used with active purgatives in order to disguise their flavor and combat this tendency to cause gripe, that means intestinal cramping. The raw seed chewed stimulates the flow of gastric juices and helps to cure foul breath. It will sweeten the breath after garlic has been eaten. You know how we usually have a little parsley on the side of a plate as a garnish in a nice restaurant? Well, historically, people used cilantro, essentially, or coriander seed for that very reason, to sweeten the breath to help the digestion. Externally, the seeds have been used as a lotion and have been bruised as a poultice to treat rheumatic pains. The essential oil is used in aromatherapy. So generally, yes, it is very safe. It's just a commonly used spice and herb, but large amounts. And according to the old herbals, especially infused in wine, probably produce something close to the effect that I had with my bad experience with nutmeg. So you really don't want to do that. Trust me, that was one of the most horrible experiences of my life, and I never want to uh, replicate that. Coriander, though, was one of the herbs that was ordered by the Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne to be grown by the monasteries as both food and medicine in the capitulaire. So its history in herbal medicine is, well established. It was very much used by the Benedictines and the entire system and school of herbal medicine in Christendom in the Middle Ages. By the time we get to Brother Aloysius, he kind of summarizes the monastic and German folk medicine use. He said coriander is used internally to expel the wind and strengthen the stomach. It's good for indigestion, mucus stomach, mucus in the intestines, nausea, diarrhea, dizziness, arthralgia, intermittent fever, and as a preventative for stroke. The bruised herb is used externally for inflammation, carbuncles, and ulcerations. The seed, steeped in wine, is used to promote menstruation. In the English tradition, we can see that Gerard in the 1500s recommended making essentially a candy of coriander seed with sugar and make a little after dinner mint almost of it. Didn't have mint in it, it was a coriander candy. And he said it would settle the stomach, prevent vomiting, and help digestion. It would also be good for the breath. And as I've mentioned before, the English had incredibly bad teeth. And one of the main concerns of the time was very bad breath due to rotten teeth. They may have had grand castles and beautiful silk clothes, but they had horrible breath. And the English have always been known really for having bad teeth. And it actually predates the importation of sugar. One of the big myths about sugar, they say sugar rots your teeth. It kind of does, but in a way that you don't realize. When you eat a lot of sugar, the effect it has on your blood sugar causes your body to have to pull minerals out of bones. And one of the first places to pull minerals out is from your teeth. So when the English began eating more sugar than anyone else on earth, when they had their sugar plantations in the Bahamas, the entire slave trade was essentially started to supply England with sugar and rum and all, that was also part of it. They began eating more sugar than anyone else and literally became world famous for having the worst teeth on earth. But even in the 1500s, they had serious dental health issues. I don't know if that's something hereditary or if it was always something to do with the English diet, but we find more herbal remedies for bad breath and bad teeth in the English tradition than pretty much any other herbal medicine tradition that I'm aware of. Anyway, he said that you could take the seed and roast it in an oven or dry it, combine it with wine, and it would kill worms, digestional worms, stop the lask, that was diarrhea, and bloody flux, and all other extraordinary issues of blood. Um, he recommended it as a condiment. Apparently, in the 1500s, coriander seed was very much used with meat. And also, he said, sufficiently dried combined with wine and vinegar would make a very nice sauce that one should have along with leaves, along with meats. But the leaves of coriander he recommended to be boiled with breadcrumbs or barley meal, and said that they were useful as a poultice for hot swellings and inflammations, and would help with the king's evil. The king's evil was usually known as wins or hard lumps. Sometimes they're called scrofula. Essentially, they were inflamed glands that wouldn't go down. And occasionally, that would be associated with gout. I think that was a little bit of a confusion. They thought the same condition that was causing the inflamed glands, the scrofulous tumors, as they were sometimes called, was causing the gout, the swelling and pain of the toe. So sometimes you see these terms kind of confused, but coriander would actually help, or cilantro would actually help with either. See, cilantro, particularly the leaves, has been shown to remove toxins, especially metals from the body, mercury, and the salts, the metallic salts, essentially, that were building up in the joints of the big toe and the end of the big toe that were causing gout, um, often caused by eating a lot of preserved meats and very rich foods, a lot of seafoods, a lot of foods that would have a lot of these minerals, metal salts, essentially. Coriander removes that from the body. You can actually detox very efficiently by eating cilantro. So, as I said, they may have not understood how this herb was helping, and they may have sometimes confused two conditions, but cilantro and coriander would have helped one way or the other. It's a very good herb. And in this day and age when our drinking water, unless you have a nice deep well, as I do when I'm home, um, our drinking water is incredibly contaminated. You think about your average municipal water system. You've got, I don't know, let's just say 50,000 people in a town, the ballpark it, right? Out of those 50,000 people, most of them, like about 80%, are taking pharmaceuticals daily. And sometimes those pharmaceuticals contain things like lithium, such as, serious bad stuff. There are estrogens in there, and there are antibiotics in there, and all that. And they're used in the bathroom, and it's being flushed right down the toilet, and it goes to the water treatment plant. The water's clean, and it goes right back into the drinking water supply. Our water treatment plants are very good at killing bacteria that can make us sick. They use chlorine, they use chloramine. actually very toxic substances. I mean, you've heard of chlorine gas. I mean, it can kill you, really wrecks your gut health when you're drinking in water. There's also fluoride. Fluoride is a very dangerous, very toxic substance. It has not actually been proven to do much for dental health whatsoever. It does seem to make the teeth harder, but it doesn't improve overall dental health. Fluoride was used, for instance, by the Nazis, given to prisoners in concentration camps to make them more docile. One has to wonder if the reason we're all being forced to consume all this fluoride is for our health or to make us easier to be herded like sheep and slopped like cattle, as I always say. I mean, we know that's the goal of our public education system. That the founders and designers of the public education system said, we want to create an education system in America that does not teach people to think for themselves, does not make them inventors and scientists and great thinkers and philosophers and writers. It makes them good factory workers and soldiers. It was explicitly said, and if you're not aware of that, please read the introductory chapter in my book, Herbal Medicine for Preppers, Homesteaders, and Permaculture People, where I just lay out a lot of the history and quote these people to point out that we're not taught to think for ourselves. We're not taught to think our way through problems. We're not taught to use logic and reason and linear thought. We're actually just taught to not question authority, do what we're told, be herded like cattle and slop like pigs. I mean, the garbage they feed kids in high school cafeterias should be illegal. I'm sorry, it's not even it shouldn't even be labeled as food fit for human consumption. Back on the water supply, our water in the average municipal system may be free from a lot of the bacteria that can cause food poisoning and such, and dysentery, and that's good. But it's also full of the remnants of all those pharmaceuticals and all the things people put down drains they shouldn't, okay, like motor oil and different things. And all the stuff they're adding supposedly for our health, which is really wrecking our health. So having cilantro in your food and cilantro growing in your garden is a really good idea, especially if you don't have good clean water. Now, by the 1930s, the English still were not eating cilantro. They were not eating the tops of coriander. Um, they only were using the seeds, as best I can tell, both as medicine and food. So Miss Grieve, in a modern herbal, published about 1931, points out that the inhabitants of Peru are so fond of the taste and smell of this herb that it enters into almost all of their dishes, and the taste is objectionable to anyone but a native. So, in the opinion of the English in the 1930s, only the Peruvians were crazy enough to eat cilantro, and any Englishman would be absolutely disgusted by the smell of the food and the taste of it. Well, she obviously didn't know that it wasn't just the Peruvians; it was just about everybody in South America and Mexico and China and you know various places. But I guess her experience had been with Peru. But she also mentions that in Egypt they put the leaves into soup. So apparently, the Egyptians and the Peruvians were the ones that had the reputation for eating cilantro at the time, which is kind of funny when you think about it, how common the herb is now. I mean, you can walk into any grocery store, probably in anywhere in America. I don't know about Canada, probably most of Canada. And you're probably going to find some fresh cilantro in the vegetable section and dried cilantro in the spice and herb aisle because in the past 30, 40 years as Mexican cuisine has really become international. we've just become so accom- uh, we've become so accommodated to eating cilantro, and we don't even really stop to think that, like I said, I didn't really even encounter it until I was about 10 or 11 years old, and I'm sure my grandparents never encountered cilantro in their entire lives. She mentions that coriander was brought to England by the Romans when the Romans occupied England. That's how old and how important, really how essential it was. When imagine soldiers actually bringing herbs with them to plant, so they knew they had them when they need them. That's how important coriander was to the Roman soldier a couple thousand years ago. And she mentions that the name coriander, according to Pliny, Pliny the Elder wrote extensively on plants and many things, was derived from the Greek word koros, meaning a bug that had a fetid or stinking smell. So, yeah, it really does mean stink bug. She mentions that in northern countries of Europe, coriander seed was included in bread and in alcoholic beverages. Many of the liqueurs, of the digestifs, the great, named liquors of Europe, Benedictine, absinthe, vermouth, go down the list, whether it's wine or distilled or a sweetened beverage, whatever, would have had coriander as one of the primary ingredients because it was good for the stomach. It was considered to aid digestion and have such great medicinal properties, as well as being a flavor enhancer. And if you think of the original wormwood, the original vermouth, which is Old German for wormwood, um, it would have had both wormwood in it, which is the flavoring ingredient in absinthe as well, which contains thujan, and coriander, and probably two or three other herbs that had psychoactive or narcotic properties. And that it wasn't just medicinal. People could get quite buzzed off of a few glasses of a lot of the old herb and herbal infused wines and liqueurs of Europe. They were very strong. In Stephen Harold Buhner's book, Sacred and Healing Herbal Beers, he just talks about some of the herbs as they were used in brewing. And, there were several beers that had herbs in there that caused psychotic frenzy. People would actually take these beers and drink them for the purposes of stirring themselves up to fight and just to go crazy. And they liked it. So when people talk about, how sober our ancestors were, yeah, they really weren't. That's a complete, utter myth. I mean, even the Puritans of New England were very heavy drinkers. That whole myth really didn't even get going until the late 1800s when the prohibition movement, the temperance movement, came along and basically tried to rewrite our history. Uh, our ancestors uh, usually, because the water was bad for one thing, drank from morning till night and drank a lot. And children drank, old people drank, women drank. Uh, that's the real history, and not what we're taught in schools. Not surprisingly, schools don't teach much worth knowing, do they? So she listed the medicinal uses of coriander as stimulant, aromatic, and carminative. Carminative means settles the stomach. You can pretty much figure stimulant in this point. In this case, she means stimulates the appetite, and aromatic just refers to its scent. She said the powdered fruit was used, she means the seed was crushed and used medicinally and was often used to disguise the taste of other medicines that may be more bitter and to prevent, again, the griping, the intestinal cramps that they may cause. It was often used in confections, syrups, and tinctures. It was often combined with senna, which was a very popular laxative in England, and with rhubarb, also a very popular laxative in England. The English were kind of famous for having bad teeth and constipation. Uh, well, that's also the reason they boil their vegetables down to mush. They had bad teeth and constipation. But anyway, and she also mentions that if used too freely, the seeds become narcotic. No one gives a quantity, no one gives a measurement and says how much is going to cause an issue. Like I said, just be careful with it. And speaking of those old liqueurs and wines and such, really interesting book called The Drunken Botanist by Amy Stewart. She really goes through the history of herbs used in spirituous drinks, as they would say. She says coriander is a favorite ingredient among distillers. It's found in almost all gins and in many herbal liqueurs, absinthe, aquavit, pastis, and vermouth. But anyone who has ever eaten the leaf of the coriander plant, called cilantro in the Americas, might wonder why they so rarely encounter this distinctive flavor in any of these drinks. The reason is that the fruit, the round brown seeds, undergo a chemical change as they dry, shedding the bright cilantro flavor completely. The essential oil found in the fresh leaves on the surface of the unripe fruit is instantly recognizable and not to everyone's liking. But that, she explains, owes to a genetic difference in how people perceive flavor. Some people call it fetid, means stinky or rotten, right? And others say it smells of bugs. And again, she says the Greek name for bed bug was chorus, and the root of the early Greek name coriandrum. But apparently, some of us have a genetic predisposition to enjoy the flavor of the plant. So it depends on who your parents were, I guess. But she says that deep inside the fruit is another oil that is easily extracted once the fruit is dry. And this oil, which is dominated by linalool, thymol, and geraniol acetate, a compound from geraniums, is what's used in alcohol as a flavoring. That it combines the woodsy notes of thyme and the rich perfume of geranium, along with the bright floral citrus flavor of linalool. Linalool, I guess, Linlool. So that solves the mystery of why some people love it or hate it. It absolutely depends on your heritage. And, yeah, I'm part English, but I'm also part French and part Creole. And as you know, the Creole use cilantro quite a bit. So I'm thinking that's probably where my love of this plant comes from, unless I just learned to love it as I fell in love with Mexican food. Who knows? But if you really want to enjoy some cilantro, here's a wonderful way to do it. Don't buy salsa and picante sauce and all that in jars and such from the grocery store. It's horrible. Get some tomatoes, and we're going to make this a fresh pico de gallo. Super simple. You probably already know how to do this. If you don't, just get a couple of nice ripe tomatoes, chop them up fine. Combine that with some chopped cilantro, some lemon or lime juice, a few hot peppers. The secret about hot peppers is most of the heat is in the white ribs that attach to the seeds. You can get, let's say, with the exception of habanero, which is just going to be really hot any way you look at it. I mean, habanero, ghost pepper, all that, they're going to be hot, okay? But if you're talking jalapenos, serrano peppers, anything like that, if you don't like a lot of heat, cut the ribs and seeds out. If you like a lot of heat, leave them in. It's up to you. Or use more peppers. I will usually take maybe, let's say for a batch of pico de gallo or fresh salsa, which is made very similarly, um, two or three, say medium-sized tomatoes or maybe two big tomatoes. Chop them up. Throw in there, I usually use maybe six jalapenos or serrano peppers or a combination of both, or any other hot pepper, yeah, I feel like. In terms of fresh cilantro, a good bunch. Just take the tops of them, chop them up fine. If you're using dried cilantro, I would use maybe a tablespoon. I like cilantro. The juice of one lemon or lime, and salt and pepper to taste. So we got, oh, and an onion, obviously. An onion, like a medium sized yellow or white onion, is very good. And of course, garlic. You gotta have garlic. I usually use maybe three, four cloves, fresh garlic. Crush the garlic and then chop it up. You want those oils to come out. So, what are my ingredients? Well, let's see. I've got onion, I've got tomato, I got garlic, cilantro, hot peppers, lemon juice, salt and pepper to taste. That's it. Super easy, fresh, so good for you. It's one of the most nutritious salads, if you want to look at it that way, that you can possibly get. Dip it in chips, put it on top of some refried beans, on some beef, enjoy it, have a good beer with it, and this is how our ancestors ate. This is how people that have sense still eat. We don't get things pre-made in a store. This is the bounty of the earth that God gave us, from the cilantro and coriander that people have used for medicine for thousands of years, to the beer that was once called by our ancestors God is good, because it was considered such a blessing that such a gift could be made from barley and hops and, yeast, a good natural fermented food. And of course, if you can't drink alcohol, don't feel compelled. But if you can, enjoy it. Enjoy life. Slow down, have a good meal, and don't rush through life eating garbage. I'm going to give you a little quote by probably the most famous food writer of the past few hundred years. His name was, let's see, Jean Anselme Brillat Savarin. Okay. I'm sure I did not pronounce that because while I may have a good bit of French heritage, I cannot speak French or read French and did very, very badly in school when I attempted to, to learn French two or three times. Uh, I don't know why Latin comes easily to me. French never did. He said, "The pleasures of the table belong to all ages, to all conditions, to all countries, and to all areas. It mingles with all other pleasures and remains at last to console us for their departure." It's a really interesting quote when you think about it. It mingles with all other pleasures. Good food makes everything else in life nicer, and remains at last to console us for their departure. When you can't enjoy all the other things in life you've always enjoyed, good food still makes life better. And when we think, from my perspective, what a blessing that food is, whether it's, meat, where an animal gave its life for us, okay, or it's fish, or it's vegetables fresh from the garden. These are all such incredible blessings from God. And I think it is such a shame and a degradation to the human spirit, an insult to our Creator when we don't prepare food well, enjoy food, emphasize dining. I mean, the entire all of Christian tradition hinges on essentially a meal. I mean, God could have interacted with people in any other way, but he chose what Catholic Church calls the Eucharist, what Protestant churches just call communion, bread and wine, uh, linked back to the Passover feast of the Jewish tradition. He doesn't come to us in a way we can't understand or a complex way. He comes to us as food and drink, and to feast together, to eat together, to spend time with family in that way is usually where our best memories and our best family traditions come from. And I think one of the worst things that has happened in our culture and our society is to get away from that. Not preparing food ourselves, not growing gardens, not, growing livestock and harvesting from the wild, not cooking, but relying on convenience food and fast food and not spending time with our family and friends and loved ones, not communicating, just shoving something in your mouth fast while you're driving, sitting, at a table looking at your phone and texting or, wasting time on social media and not even paying attention to the food you eat. Yeah, honestly, to me, that is probably one of the most detrimental influences on American society, culture, and family life. And really, again, when you when you focus on the food you're eating, on its quality and its preparation and its taste, and in sharing it for others with others, and you really appreciate it, you are filled with gratitude. And that giving thanks for the meal is such an important thing, such an important aspect of worship. Um, the dependence on of the creation on the Creator. When we get away from that and we're just like shoving fast food down our mouths without even thinking about it, we're not grateful for what we're eating. We're not grateful either for God who created it, or for the animal that gave its life, or for the good weather that produced, the lettuce and tomatoes that went on that hamburger, right? Good food is so essential to health. It is so essential to quality of life, and I firmly believe it's essential to humanity It's one of those things that makes us human, that we don't just like a dog go to our dish and gulp down a bunch of tasteless dry dog food. We sit down and we have a meal with friends and family, and we appreciate what's in front of us, and we're grateful for what's in front of us, and we share the entire aspect of sharing food with other people. That is such a part of our human condition. It's what elevates us as a species. And so, you know, this week, when you think about it, look at those herbs and spices in your cabinet and check out some of their medicinal qualities. Get a good cookbook and try a new recipe. Start planning that next garden. And we're not that far from the fall holidays. Start thinking about spending time with the people you care about, and what acts of love can you present through the food you might cook. I mean, that's a big statement, right? But what is a dish of cookies someone baked for their neighbor, if not an act of love? What is the chicken soup your mother gives you when you're sick, if not an act of love? Cooking food, I don't think I can say it more succinctly. It is essential to our humanity and also to our health. So y'all have a great, healthy, humane week. Be sure to buy my books. You can find them on Amazon. And you may have already figured out my next one's going to be a cookbook. I've got food on my mind quite a bit. Y'all have a great week. I'll see you next time. And go enjoy some salsa.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.